What happens when a prince walks onto a morning talk show expecting royal treatment, only to discover that American television doesn't bow to anyone? In just 33 seconds, one entitled comment would trigger a meltdown so spectacular that security would have to escort a member of the British royal family off the set. This is the story of how Prince Harry went from honored guest to unwelcome presence faster than you can say, "Good Morning America." The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in New York City. The crew was buzzing with excitement. Prince Harry was scheduled to appear. A real-life prince. The kind of guest that brings ratings, attention, and prestige. Lara Spencer, the show's beloved co-host, had done her homework. She knew the talking points, the safe questions, the topics that would make for good television. What she didn't know was that this interview would become one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Harry walked onto the set with the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of cameras and crowds. He shook hands, smiled for the audience, and took his seat across from Lara. The energy in the studio was electric. This was going to be a great segment, or so everyone thought. Lara opened with a warm welcome. "Prince Harry, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're thrilled to have you here." Harry nodded, a slight smile on his face. "Happy to be here. Now, you've been spending quite a bit of time in the United States lately," Lara continued, leaning forward with genuine interest. "How are you finding life on this side of the Atlantic?" Harry's smile tightened just a fraction. "Well, it's certainly different. Not quite what I'm used to, if I'm being honest." Lara sensed something beneath the surface, but pressed on. "Different how? I mean, I imagine there are some adjustments, but hopefully it's been a positive experience overall." "Positive?" Harry's tone shifted slightly. "I suppose that depends on your perspective. There are certain standards I grew up with, certain ways things are done, and I've noticed that here, those standards don't always apply." The audience stirred. Lara kept her professional smile in place, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. "Standards? Can you elaborate on that?" Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Well, for example, punctuality. In the royal household, when you're scheduled for something, everything runs like clockwork. Here, I've been kept waiting more times than I can count. It's rather disrespectful, don't you think?" Lara's smile remained, but there was steel in her voice now. "Well, I can assure you that here at Good Morning America, we value our guests' time. We had you scheduled for 8:15, and here we are, right on schedule." "Yes, but I arrived at 7:45 and had to wait in the green room," Harry said, his voice taking on a petulant edge. "That's not exactly the treatment I'm accustomed to." The audience was silent now. You could feel the tension building. Lara straightened in her chair. "Prince Harry, with all due respect, that's fairly standard for television production. We have makeup, sound checks, briefings. Every guest goes through the same process." "Every guest isn't a prince," Harry shot back. And there it was. The comment that would define the entire interview. The moment where entitled privilege showed its face on national television. Lara's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "That's true. But on this show, we treat everyone with the same respect and professionalism, whether they're a prince, a politician, or a teacher from Iowa. That's what makes America special." Harry's face flushed slightly. "Are you suggesting that I'm asking for special treatment?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps your expectations and our reality are a bit misaligned," Lara replied calmly. "We're honored to have you here, but the process is the process." Harry uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his voice rising. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. This lack of understanding about protocol and proper respect. Do you know who I am?" The audience gasped. Lara didn't miss a beat. "Yes, Prince Harry, I know exactly who you are, and I also know who I am. I'm a journalist doing my job, which includes asking questions and having honest conversations. If that's uncomfortable for you, perhaps we should move on to a different topic. Uncomfortable? Harry's voice was getting louder now. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm simply pointing out that there's a level of decorum that should be maintained. I've been interviewed by the BBC, by Sky News, by proper journalists who understand how to conduct themselves. The word proper hung in the air like a slap. Lara's jaw tightened. Proper journalists? That's interesting, because last I checked, Good Morning America has won multiple Emmy Awards and reaches millions of viewers every single day. We might do things differently than British television, but that doesn't make us improper. Harry waved his hand dismissively. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it then? Lara asked, her voice still calm, but with an edge that anyone watching could hear. Because it sounded an awful lot like you were implying that American journalists are somehow beneath your standards. I'm saying that there are certain expectations when you're dealing with someone of my position, Harry said, his face growing redder, and I don't appreciate being spoken to as if those expectations are unreasonable. Lara leaned back and folded her hands on the desk. Let me be very clear about something, Prince Harry. When you agreed to come on this show, you agreed to have a conversation. Not a coronation, not a ceremony. A conversation. That means both of us get to speak. Both of us get to express our views. That's how it works here. This is absurd, Harry muttered, looking away from her and toward the cameras. I came here to talk about my charitable work, my foundation, the causes I care about. Instead, I'm being lectured about American values. You're the one who brought up standards and respect, Lara countered. I was asking about your experience living in the United States. You're the one who turned it into a critique of how we do things here. Harry stood up suddenly, his microphone cord tugging at his lapel. I don't have to sit here and be spoken to like this. The audience was completely silent. Cameras were still rolling. Lara remained seated, looking up at him with remarkable composure. Prince Harry, I haven't been disrespectful to you. I've asked fair questions and responded to your comments. If you feel that constitutes poor treatment, then perhaps the issue isn't with how I'm conducting this interview. The issue, Harry said, his voice shaking with barely controlled anger, is that I expected a certain level of professionalism, and what I'm getting is an interrogation. An interrogation? Lara's eyebrows rose. Prince Harry, with all due respect, if you think this is an interrogation, you haven't been paying attention to journalism. I've been nothing but courteous. I've given you every opportunity to steer this conversation in a positive direction. You're the one who chose to complain about waiting in the green room and question our professionalism. Harry pulled at his microphone, trying to remove it. His hands were fumbling with the clip. This is a waste of my time. I have better things to do than sit here and be insulted on live television. Nobody has insulted you, Lara said firmly. But if being treated like everyone else feels like an insult to you, that says more about your expectations than it does about our show. I'm done here, Harry announced, finally getting the microphone free and dropping it on the chair. This entire thing has been completely unprofessional. Lara stood now, her voice still measured and calm. Prince Harry, you're welcome to leave if you choose to do so. But I want to be clear, for our viewers, that what just happened here was a guest who came on expecting deference and left when he received honest conversation instead. That's his choice to make. Harry was already walking toward the edge of the set. A producer rushed forward, trying to guide him, but Harry brushed past. Don't touch me, he snapped at the young production assistant, who had only been trying to help him navigate the cables and equipment. The cameras stayed on Lara, who took a deep breath and looked directly into the lens. Well, folks, that was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our planned programming. But off camera, things were escalating. Harry had reached the wings of the studio, and his voice could still be heard, even though he was no longer on screen. This is outrageous. I was assured this would be a respectful interview. Instead, I'm ambushed by someone who clearly has no idea how to speak to a member of the royal family. A stage manager approached him, speaking in low, calming tones. "Sir, if you could please come this way, we can sort this out." "Sort what out?" Harry demanded. "There's nothing to sort out. This entire show is a joke. The host is a joke. I want to speak to whoever is in charge here." The executive producer appeared, a woman in her 50s with decades of television experience. "Prince Harry, I'm the executive producer. What seems to be the problem?" "The problem?" Harry's voice was incredulous. "The problem is that your host just disrespected me on live television. She questioned my expectations, implied I was being difficult, and basically accused me of being entitled." The producer kept her voice level. "Sir, I was watching the interview. Ms. Spencer was professional throughout. She asked reasonable questions and responded to your comments with honesty." "She was rude," Harry insisted. "She needs to apologize. On air. Right now." The producer shook her head slowly. "That's not going to happen, sir. Mrs. Spencer did nothing wrong. She conducted the interview exactly as she would with any guest who made similar comments." Harry's face was now completely red. "Then I want a new interview. With a different host. Someone who actually knows how to conduct themselves." "I'm afraid that's not possible," the producer said firmly. "The interview portion of your appearance is over. At this point, we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "Ask me to leave?" Harry looked genuinely shocked. "You're throwing me out?" "You chose to walk off the set," the producer reminded him. "You removed your microphone. You told us you were done. We're simply respecting your decision." "I changed my mind," Harry said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "I want to go back out there. I want to finish the interview properly." The producer crossed her arms. "Prince Harry, that ship has sailed. You made your choice in front of millions of viewers. You can't unmake it now. We need you to collect your things and exit the building. This is unacceptable." Harry's voice echoed through the hallway. Staff members had gathered at a distance, watching the spectacle unfold. "Do you have any idea who I am? What kind of influence I have? I can make sure nobody ever watches this pathetic excuse for a morning show again." Lara Spencer had walked off the set during the commercial break and now stood at the edge of the hallway, observing. She didn't approach, didn't engage, just watched with the calm demeanor of someone who had absolutely nothing to apologize for. Harry spotted her and pointed. "You! This is all your fault. You deliberately provoked me. You wanted this to happen." Lara didn't respond. She simply looked at him with an expression that somehow managed to be both sympathetic and utterly unmoved. The producer stepped between them. "Sir, that's enough. Security is on their way to escort you out. Please, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "Security?" Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're calling security on me? This is insane. This whole country is insane." 2 security guards appeared, large men in dark suits with earpieces. They weren't aggressive, but their presence made the situation very clear. This was no longer a negotiation. "Prince Harry," one of them said in a deep, calm voice, "we're going to need you to come with us, please." "Don't touch me," Harry warned, holding up his hands. "I'll walk out on my own. I don't need an escort." "We insist," the guard said, not moving. Harry looked around the hallway, at all the faces staring at him. Production assistants, camera operators, makeup artists, writers. All of them witnessing his meltdown. All of them seeing exactly how a prince behaves when he doesn't get his way. For a moment, it looked like he might resist further. His jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. But then something in him seemed to deflate. The anger gave way to something else. Embarrassment, maybe. Or the dawning realization of what he had just done. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll leave." The security guards flanked him, not touching, but close enough to intervene if needed. They walked him toward the exit, past the studio, past the green rooms, past the administrative offices. Every step of the way, people stopped what they were doing and watched. At the exit, Harry paused and turned back. The guards tensed, ready for anything, but Harry just looked down the long hallway one last time, as if trying to think of something to say that would salvage the situation. Nothing came. He turned and walked through the door. Back in the studio, the show had returned from commercial break. Lara was back at the desk, composed and professional. Welcome back, everyone. As you saw before the break, Prince Harry decided to cut his interview short. We respect his decision and wish him well. Now, let's move on to our next segment. And just like that, it was over. The interview that was supposed to boost ratings and create positive buzz had instead become a viral moment for all the wrong reasons. Within minutes, clips were spreading across social media. Within hours, it was international news. A prince, escorted out of a television studio by security after having a meltdown on live television. The whole thing had taken less than 15 minutes from start to finish. 15 minutes for a guest to arrive, complain, escalate, walk off, and get removed from the building. 15 minutes to destroy his own appearance and prove every negative stereotype about entitled royalty. Lara Spencer handled the rest of the show without mentioning it again. She interviewed a chef about summer recipes. She discussed a new movie release with an actor. She laughed with her co-hosts during the lighter segments, professional, gracious, and completely unfazed by what had just happened. In the control room, the director and producers were already dealing with the aftermath. Phone calls from network executives, statements being drafted, legal teams being consulted. But there was also a sense of vindication. They had done nothing wrong. They had treated a guest with the same respect they showed everyone. If that guest couldn't handle honest conversation, that was his problem, not theirs. The green room, where Harry had complained about waiting, was cleaned and prepared for the next guest. The chair where he had sat during the interview was adjusted for someone else. The studio moved on, because that's what television does. It moves on. The show doesn't stop for anyone, not even a prince. Outside the building, Harry was climbing into a waiting car. His security detail was on their phones, no doubt trying to do damage control. His publicist would be having a terrible morning. His advisors would be scrambling to come up with a response. But none of that could change what had happened. None of that could erase the footage of him losing his temper, demanding special treatment, and being escorted out by security. Inside, Lara finished the show with her usual warmth and professionalism. When the cameras stopped rolling, her co-hosts congratulated her for handling the situation with such grace. The crew gave her a round of applause. She smiled, accepted the praise, and then went about her day. Because at the end of it all, she had simply done her job. She had asked questions. She had responded honestly. She had maintained her dignity, even when her guest had lost his. The interview became a teaching moment in journalism schools. How to handle a difficult guest. How to maintain composure under pressure. How to stand your ground without losing your professionalism. Lara Spencer became an example of everything a host should be when faced with entitled behavior. And Prince Harry became an example of what happens when you expect the world to bow to you, only to discover that some places just won't. No matter who you are, no matter what title you hold, no matter how important you think you are. Because in America, on live television, with millions of people watching, everyone is equal. Everyone gets asked the same questions. Everyone is held to the same standards. And if you can't handle that, well, there's the door. Security will be happy to show you where it is. The story didn't end when Harry left the building, but that's where it mattered most. That moment when an entitled guest realized that his title meant nothing in the face of honest journalism. That moment when privilege met professionalism and lost. That moment when a prince discovered that some thrones are just chairs and some crowns are just hats, and respect is earned, not inherited. Lara Spencer earned hers that morning. She earned it by doing exactly what she was supposed to do. Ask questions. Listen to answers. Respond with honesty. Maintain her composure. Treat everyone fairly. And refuse to be intimidated by someone who thought his last name made him special. That's the story. That's what happened when a prince walked onto Good Morning America expecting royal treatment and walked out escorted by security. 33 seconds. That's all it took for one entitled comment to trigger a meltdown that would be replayed and discussed for years to come. One moment of honesty from a host who refused to bow. One display of entitlement from a guest who couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. And in the end, the lesson was clear. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you're used to. When you sit down for an interview, you're there to have a conversation, not to be worshipped. Not to be